Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack those small details that honestly can make a huge difference. Imagine you're a federal employee, dedicated, doing your job, and then bam, a work injury. Suddenly, it's not just about healing. You're thrown into this maze of rules, paperwork, potential financial headaches.
Yeah.
Today, we're zeroing in on one very specific rule, the OWCP 4-hour administrative leave rule. Sounds simple, right? 4 hours. But trust me, understanding the hidden twists can really make or break your recovery journey. Our mission here is to really clarify who gets this, how it actually works on the ground, the big pitfalls you need to sidestep, and some smart ways to use it effectively. And we're basing all this on the official guidance.
Exactly. And this isn't just about, memorizing some regulation. It's about empowering you, the listener, to understand how the system is actually set up to help you recover and giving you the tools to navigate it without all that extra stress or worry about money, so you can just focus on getting better.
Okay, let's dive in then. At its heart, what is this 4-hour rule, and who exactly qualifies for it?
So, in essence, if you're a federal employee and you have a work-related injury that OWCP has officially accepted, that's the key part, you're generally entitled to up to 4 hours of excused absence for each medical appointment for that specific injury. This time off, it's usually called administrative leave. And crucially, it's not your sick leave or your annual leave.
Ah, okay. So it doesn't drain your personal time off banks.
Right. It's a separate category specifically for these approved work-related medical visits. The whole policy comes from the Office of Workers' Compensation Programs, OWCP guidance under the Federal Employees Compensation Act, or FECA.
So definitely not just some casual workplace perk. It's baked into federal regulations.
Yeah.
What's the absolute #1 condition? The gatekeeper, so to speak.
The absolute gatekeeper is that OWCP has to accept your injury claim as work-related, officially, in writing. If your claim is still pending review, or if it's been denied, well, then this 4-hour rule doesn't automatically apply. That acceptance letter from OWCP, that's your non-negotiable ticket.
Got it. Accepted claim is step 1. Now, about this up to 4 hours phrase, how firm is that? Is it always capped at 4?
It's a strong guideline, definitely the standard. The official wording is something like no more than 4 hours of pay. That could be your regular pay, or continuation of pay should be granted for a routine medical appointment. But there can be flexibility.
Okay, how so?
Well, longer absences can be approved, but you need a specific justification. Let's say you need a procedure that just takes longer, or maybe you have to travel a significant distance for specialized care. If there's a documented medical reason, more time can be approved. But otherwise, OWCP generally sees 4 hours, including travel time, as reasonable. Anything beyond that, you're typically looking at using your own leave sick, annual, or taking leave without pay, LWOP, unless your doctor provides solid medical documentation explaining why more time was necessary.
Okay, so the claim's accepted. How do agencies handle this day to day? What does the employee actually need to do?
Right, so the agency is responsible for putting this policy into practice. Usually, you need to get approval from your supervisor before the appointment. Emergencies might be an exception, of course. And it's really best practice to let your supervisor know as far in advance as you can about the date and time.
And how does it show up on the timesheet?
That's important. It should be coded as administrative leave, or maybe the agency has a specific injury leave code. The key is that it's not coded as sick or annual leave. That protects your personal leave balances.
Now, here's something I know trips people up. The continuation of pay period, or COP. That's the first 45 days after a traumatic injury, right? How does this rule interact with COP?
Yes, COP. This is where things get really nuanced and honestly where you need to be strategic. During that 45-day COP window, anytime you take off for a medical appointment related to the injury is charged to COP. But here's the critical part. Any amount of COP used in a single workday, even just say 2 hours for a doctor's visit, counts as 1 full day against your 45-day entitlement.
Wait, really? So if I go to the doctor for just an hour or two on a COP day?
Yep. That uses up 1 whole day of your 45 days.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge heads up. So using 3 hours for an appointment burns one of those precious 45 COP days.
Exactly. It forces you to think carefully about scheduling. It's not just managing hours, it's managing a finite number of fully paid days off. Those 45 days can disappear faster than you think if you have frequent, short appointments on separate days.
That does sound incredibly strict. Is there any flexibility there, or maybe a reason behind that specific rule?
With COP, that rule is pretty rigid, unfortunately. Any use within a calendar day counts as a full day used. The thinking behind COP is to provide immediate, full income replacement for days. An employee is genuinely unable to perform any work due to a traumatic injury. So when you tap into it, even for a short appointment, you're using that daily benefit and it gets marked off. It's definitely a significant detail to track.
Okay, so those 45 COP days are critical but easily consumed. What happens after COP runs out? Or what if the injury is an occupational illness, where COP usually doesn't apply anyway? How does the 4-hour rule work then?
Good question. Once you're past the COP period, or if you have an occupational illness claim, you could still often use administrative leave for those brief appointments again, generally up to that 4-hour mark. The other main option is to take leave without pay, LWOP, for the time you're at the appointment. If you use LWOP, you can then file a claim with OWCP for what's called wage loss compensation. Basically, OWCP reimburses you for the pay you lost during those approved appointment hours.
And does OWCP reimburse the full time if you use LWOP?
Generally, OWCP will compensate up to 4 hours of wage loss per appointment through that CA7 wage loss claim. If you needed more time and took more LWOP, you'd need that special medical justification we talked about earlier for OWCP to potentially cover the additional hours. And it's worth repeating. Agencies expect you to come back to work after your appointment if there's still time left in your shift. Taking the whole day off isn't automatic unless the doctor says it's medically necessary.
It sounds like keeping track of everything, the documentation, is just essential. What kind of paperwork are we talking about, and why is it so incredibly important?
Documentation is absolutely everything. Think of it less as red tape and more as your personal shield in this process. Because here's the thing. Without that clear paper trail, the burden falls entirely on you to prove you were where you said you were for the reason you said. Lack of proof can lead to your leave being charged incorrectly or claims being denied. So what do you need? You must provide proof of the medical appointment. Usually, a simple note or appointment slip from the doctor's office works. It should verify the date and time you were there. Ideally, it even shows arrival and departure times.
Just the appointment slip?
Yeah.
Or more?
Often, yes, more is needed. OWCP and your agency will likely want some medical evidence that links that specific appointment back to your accepted work injury. This could be a short progress note from the doctor, or maybe a completed OWCP form like the CA17 duty status report. The official stance is pretty clear. Any absence related to the injury must be supported by medical documentation to be excused or paid for.
And what if the appointment really does take longer than 4 hours? Like an all-day procedure?
Then the doctor's documentation becomes even more critical. The doctor has to explicitly justify the extra time. The note needs to say something specific, like, patient required sedation after procedure, unable to return to work for the remainder of the day. Something clear like that.
Okay. You mentioned filing for wage loss if someone uses LWOP. How does that work with documentation?
Right. If you're using LWOP and claiming wage loss from OWCP using the CA7 form, you also need to fill out what's called a time analysis form, or CA7A. Don't let the name scare you. It's basically your detailed timesheet just for these injury-related absences. You list the specific dates and hours you missed work for each appointment, and critically, each entry on that CA7A needs to line up with a corresponding medical note or slip verifying that appointment. It's how you formally tell OWCP exactly what hours you're claiming pay for.
So, boiling it down for an employee trying to navigate this, what are the absolute must-dos, the core responsibilities?
Okay, 3 core things to keep you on track. 1. Request approval for the absence from your supervisor before you go, giving as much notice as possible. 2. Attend the medical appointment as scheduled, obviously. And 3. Promptly provide the required documentation, the doctor's note or slip, maybe that CA17 form, as proof of your visit and its connection to the injury. Miss any of these, especially the documentation, and you risk the agency charging your personal leave, maybe even marking you OWAL, and OWCP will almost certainly deny any wage loss claim for that time. That paperwork shield is vital.
Okay, we've mapped out the rules. But we all know that understanding rules and avoiding real-world mistakes are 2 different things. What are some of the most common traps or pitfalls employees stumble into here?
Oh, definitely. One of the biggest ones, and it catches people off guard, is assuming they get the entire day off just because they have a medical appointment. They think, okay, doctor's appointment, work injury, I'm off for the day. But that's usually not how it works. Only the time actually needed for the appointment and reasonable travel up to that 4-hour guideline is typically excused. We've seen real cases, like one involving the Postal Service, where an employee took 8 hours off for an MRI that only lasted about an hour. OWCP denied the claim for the extra hours because there was no medical note saying they couldn't work the rest of the day. That employee was likely very surprised.
Okay, so don't assume a full day. What else?
Another huge one is inadequate medical documentation. Just getting a slip saying you were there might not be enough if you need extended time off. Failing to get a note that clearly states you were seen and specifies if you were unable to work beyond the appointment time is a common problem. OWCP needs that medical justification for the specific dates and hours you missed. They won't just assume.
Right, that documentation shield again.
Exactly. Then there's burning through those COP days unintentionally. We talked about this. Spreading out lots of short appointments eats up those 45 days really fast. People don't always realize how quickly they're using them up until they're gone. We also sometimes see employer misunderstandings. Not every supervisor is an OWCP expert, you know. Some might mistakenly tell an employee to use sick leave for an appointment that should be admin leave or COP. Or they might even push back on granting the time off. Knowing your rights, having the OWCP guidance maybe bookmarked, and having your documentation ready really helps you advocate for yourself in those situations.
That's a good point. Any other major risks?
Yes, and this one's important. The risk related to claim denial or delay. If your underlying OWCP claim is still pending when you use admin leave or COP, or if it ultimately gets denied, the agency might reverse that time off. You could end up having to use your own sick or annual leave retroactively to cover those hours, or worse, face an overpayment situation where the agency says you owe back the wages you were paid for that time. It's a potential financial hit if the claim itself isn't solid.
That makes sense. To make this really concrete for everyone listening, let's look at how this actually plays out in some big federal agencies. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. Let's take the USPS, the Postal Service. They deal with a lot of OWCP claims, so they're very familiar with this rule. Imagine a letter carrier who has an accepted OWCP claim for a back injury. They need physical therapy twice a week. They might use, say, 2 hours of administrative leave for each session, including travel. The expectation would be, if their shift isn't over, they return to their route or facility afterwards. And remember that USPS case. Denied pay for a full day off for a 1-hour MRI because the extra time wasn't medically justified. That shows how strictly it can be applied. Postal unions like the NALC and APW are usually pretty good about reminding members that these appointments should be on the clock, meaning admin leave or COP, not personal leave.
Okay, USPS. What about somewhere like the VA?
The Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, is another big one. Their internal directives generally mirror the OWCP rules. So maybe a VA nurse has an accepted claim for, say, a needle stick exposure. They need follow-up blood tests or doctor visits. They can use administrative leave up to 4 hours per appointment for those. Or think about a VA claims examiner who develops carpal tunnel syndrome from keyboard use, and it gets accepted by OWCP. They might need to see a specialist. They could take maybe 3 hours of admin leave for that appointment and then be expected back at their desk, assuming they have the proper approval and documentation. The VA focuses on prompt care and getting people back to work, sometimes with modified duties, but they absolutely follow the 4-hour rule for necessary appointments.
Makes sense. And how about an agency like TSA?
TSA, Transportation Security Administration, their officers are also federal employees covered by FECA. Say a TSO strains their shoulder during baggage screening and OWCP accepts the claim. They might need physical therapy or follow-up visits. They can use administrative leave up to 4 hours per visit during their scheduled shift to attend those appointments without having to use their own leave. Given the physical nature of the job in airport environments, TSA managers are generally pretty familiar with handling OWCP injuries and this leave entitlement. But the key things still apply. The injury must be OWCP approved, and the appointment has to be directly related to that injury. And while keeping checkpoints staffed is always a priority, that doesn't override an employee's right to use this medically necessary leave.
It really is striking how consistently this 4-hour rule pops up across such different agencies, isn't it? It feels like a real cornerstone of the federal workers' comp system.
It absolutely is. The core principle holds true across the board, which provides a level of predictability, at least on this specific issue, for federal employees nationwide.
Okay, so we've dissected the rules, highlighted the pitfalls, seen it in action. Let's switch gears to empowerment. What can you, the employee listening right now, do proactively to really optimize this benefit and make it work for your recovery, not against it?
Great question. There are definitely some smart strategies. First, Schedule smartly. If you can, try to book your appointments for the very beginning or the very end of your workday. Why? It minimizes disruption to your work, and it helps ensure you use the 4-hour block efficiently if the appointment itself is shorter. You're less likely to waste part of that excused time.
Okay, edge of the shift scheduling. What else?
Second, combine appointments whenever possible. If you need physical therapy and a follow-up with the doctor, see if you can schedule them back-to-back on the same day. Using one 4-hour block, or slightly more if justified, for multiple necessary visits is way more efficient. And crucially, if you're still in that COP window, doing this conserves those incredibly valuable 45 COP days, one day used instead of 2 or 3.
Smart.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Third, keep your supervisor in the loop. Always give advance notice of appointments. Let them know immediately if something gets canceled or rescheduled. This isn't just about getting approval, it's about maintaining open communication and credibility. It makes the whole process smoother.
Makes sense. Communication is key.
Fourth, never ever skip the documentation. Get that doctor's note or appointment slip every single time, even if it was just a quick 15-minute check-in. And if a visit runs unexpectedly long, don't be afraid to ask the clinic staff, hey, can you just jot down my check-in and check-out times on this slip? That documentation is your proof.
Be proactive about getting the proof.
Got it. Fifth, use OWCP compensation wisely. If your agency's policy is to put you on LWOP for these appointments, be ready to file that CA7 form for wage loss compensation, maybe every pay period. Also, think about your options. Sometimes using your own sick leave might be simpler if you just want your full, regular paycheck without delay. Other times, using LWP and claiming from OWCP is better because it preserves your sick leave balance for actual illnesses. You have to weigh what works best for your financial situation and leave balances.
Okay, weigh LWOP, OWCP versus using personal leave.
And finally, number 6, mind that 45-day COP limit like a hawk. Keep track of every single day you use COP. Seriously, mark it on a calendar. Remember our earlier discussion. Any part of a day counts as a full day. Grouping treatments can really stretch those 45 days further. You don't want to be caught by surprise when day 46 hits and your pay changes if you weren't expecting it.
That's a great set of actionable tips. Now, this whole process clearly involves more than just the employee and the agency. Medical providers play a huge role. What do they need to know to help things go smoothly?
That's a critical piece. Providers can either make this process much easier or inadvertently create hurdles. They have several key responsibilities. First, they need to clearly document every single visit. The notes should explicitly state the visit is for the work-related injury, including the OWCP case number, is ideal. They need to detail the treatment given. And crucially, they must note the time the patient was actually seen and when they were released. If the visit requires the patient to be off work longer than the standard 4 hours, maybe due to sedation, a long procedure, or significant travel time, the provider needs to state that justification in medical note.
So clear notes are job one.
Job one. Second, they should make it easy for the patient to get appointment verification slips. Just a simple slip at checkout with the patient's name, the date, and accurate arrival departure times. It doesn't need sensitive medical details, just proof of attendance and duration.
Okay, simple proof of visit.
Third, and this is a big one for billing, providers must bill OWCP directly, not the employing agency, and absolutely not the patient. They need to use the standard government billing forms, usually a CMS 1500 for professional services or a UB04 for facility charges. Think of these as the universal invoices for healthcare. If you, the listener, encounter a doctor's office that isn't familiar with OWCP billing or asks you for payment or your regular insurance card for a work injury visit, that's a potential red flag. They need to bill OWCP using your PACE number and the correct medical codes. And definitely no copays for OWCP services.
Bill OWCP directly, use the right forms, no copays. Understood.
Fourth, providers should be generally aware of OWCP fee schedules and prior authorization rules. OWCP pays based on set rates, not necessarily the provider's usual charges. And some services, like ongoing therapy or certain surgeries, often need pre-approval from OWCP. Clinics that handle OWCP cases regularly know this, but others might not.
Good to know. Anything else on the provider side?
Yes, a practical point about no-shows or cancellation fees. OWCP does not pay for missed appointments or late cancellation penalties. Providers cannot bill the agency for these, and often the patient might become personally responsible if the clinic charges them. Many providers who frequently treat injured federal workers understand this and might waive such fees.
Okay, OWCP won't pay for missed appointments. Good to know.
And finally, providers need to be helpful in completing OWCP forms when needed. Things like that CA-17 duty status report, which outlines what work duties an employee can perform. Filling these out promptly and accurately helps the employee return to work safely, even if on modified duty, and it also helps justify ongoing or future need for administrative leave for appointments.
When you lay it all out like that, it really highlights how interconnected this all is. It's not just one person's responsibility. This really raises an important question about the collaborative ecosystem needed for this benefit to actually work the way it's intended.
It absolutely does. It's the three-legged stool, really: the employee, the agency, and the medical provider. When all three understand their roles and communicate effectively, the system works. The injured employee gets the care they need without unnecessary roadblocks, and they can focus on recovery. It shifts from just being lines in a regulation to a functional support system.
We've definitely gone deep today on this OWCP 4-hour rule. We've looked at the regs, the pitfalls, the strategies. If there's one core message, one big takeaway you want every federal employee listening to grab onto, what would it be?
I think the main takeaway is this: the 4-hour administrative leave rule is a genuinely vital support for you if you're recovering from a work injury. It's there to help, but it's not automatic pilot. It comes with very specific rules and requirements, especially around documentation and justification. Understanding those details is what unlocks the benefit and helps you avoid problems. Know the rules, use the benefit wisely, and protect your recovery.
Excellent summary. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's a final thought, maybe a broader question related to this that you'd leave our listeners to chew on?
Here's something to consider. We live in a world just overloaded with information, right? Complex systems everywhere. Yet understanding a seemingly tiny niche detail like this 4-hour rule for federal employees can have a profound positive impact on someone's health journey and financial stability during a tough time. So the question to ponder is, how might digging into the specifics of other rules or benefits, maybe in your own job or your healthcare finances, empower you? What other seemingly small details hold surprising power to help you navigate complex systems more effectively?